January 15, 1990. For most Americans, it was just another Monday, a federal holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to be precise. A day for parades, for reflection, for family. In the bustling heart of AT&T's Network Operations Center, however, it was a day of quiet confidence. They were the giants, the undisputed kings of communication. For over a century, their name was synonymous with reliability. When you picked up a phone, you expected to hear a dial tone. It was as certain as the sunrise. And behind this certainty was a colossal, intricate network of wires and switches, a testament to human ingenuity. At the core of this beast was the 4ESS switch, a marvel of its time. Imagine a multi-story building humming with electronic life, capable of connecting over 500,000 phone calls every single hour. These switches were the dependable workhorses of the entire long-distance network, a complex web that crisscrossed the United States. On that particular Monday, the engineers at AT&T were overseeing a seemingly routine software update. The goal was simple: to make an already great system even better, faster, and more efficient. The new software would allow the switches to communicate with each other more rapidly, reducing the time it took to connect a call. It was a minor tweak, a single line of code in a massive digital ocean. The update had been tested, simulated, and vetted. What could possibly go wrong? The engineers felt a sense of pride, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They were custodians of a system that connected millions of lives, businesses, and even governments. The air in the control room was calm, filled with the low hum of machines and the soft glow of countless monitors displaying neat columns of data. Everything was green. Every indicator showed a system in perfect health. Outside, America was sleeping in, enjoying the holiday. Children weren't at school. Many offices were closed. It was, ironically, a low-traffic day for the network, the perfect quiet window to roll out a small, insignificant update. No one in that room, no one in the country, could have predicted that this single line of code, this tiny digital instruction, was a ticking time bomb. It was a flaw so subtle, so deeply buried, that it was about to trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, proving that in a world built on code, even giants can fall. The digital silence was about to be replaced by a deafening, nationwide crash. The day began like any other, but the seeds of chaos had already been sown. The code was live. As the morning hours ticked by, the network hummed along, blissfully unaware of the flaw it now carried. In New York City, one of the major network hubs, a 4ESS switch processed a routine diagnostic check. It encountered a minor, everyday mechanical issue, something that usually resolved itself in milliseconds. The switch did exactly what it was programmed to do. It reset itself. It was a standard procedure, a digital hiccup that should have gone unnoticed. But on this day, something was different. As the switch came back online, it sent out a status message to its neighboring switches across the country. A digital, "I'm back." But this message, thanks to the new line of code, carried a hidden poison. The message itself wasn't the problem. The problem was how the other switches would react to it. It was the first domino, teetering on the edge, about to fall and bring the entire system down with it. The chain reaction began in the blink of an eye. The moment the neighboring switches received the "I'm back" message from the rebooted New York switch, the hidden bug was triggered. The new line of code contained a flaw in its logic. It was a break statement, misplaced within a complex if clause. To a layman, it's gibberish. To the system, it was a self-destruct command. Instead of simply acknowledging the message and moving on, the receiving switches were tricked into thinking they, too, had a problem. Their software became confused, overwhelmed by a scenario their programming couldn't handle. And so, they did the only thing they could. They shut down and rebooted. It was a cascade of failures, spreading like a virus through the nervous system of the nation. Imagine a line of dominoes. The first one falls, and it's a contained event, but it strikes the next, which strikes the next, and soon the entire line is collapsing in a rhythmic, unstoppable wave. This is exactly what was happening inside AT&T's network. Each time a switch rebooted, it sent out the same flawed message to its neighbors. Those neighbors would then crash and reboot, sending the toxic message to their neighbors. The failure rippled outwards from New York, then from another switch and another. It was an electronic pandemic. Within minutes, dozens of the 114 critical 4 ESS switches across the country were caught in a paralyzing loop of crashing and rebooting. They were essentially giving each other a digital cold, and the symptoms were complete and total paralysis. On the screens in the AT&T control center, the sea of green began to turn red. Alarms, once silent, started to shriek. At first, it was confusion. A single switch failure was common. 2 or 3 was a coincidence. But this was an avalanche. Engineers watched in disbelief as huge sections of their meticulously maintained network map simply vanished. Phone calls weren't just being dropped, they weren't connecting at all. Over 75 million long-distance calls that day would simply hit a wall of silence. For the average person, the problem manifested in a simple, frustrating way. You'd pick up the phone to call your cousin in California, and instead of a ring, you'd get a fast, busy signal, or just dead air. People tried again, and again, and again. But they couldn't break through. The scale of the problem was immense and terrifying. It wasn't just a regional outage. It was a nationwide catastrophe. From Boston to Los Angeles, from Chicago to Miami, the backbone of American communication was broken. Businesses that relied on phone lines for sales, for coordination, for their very existence, were suddenly cut off. Families trying to connect across the miles were isolated. Emergency services, financial markets, air traffic control, all suddenly faced the terrifying prospect of a communication blackout. The system designed to connect everyone was now the very thing keeping them apart. And the most frightening part? No one knew why. There was no fire, no explosion, no cut cable. The enemy was invisible. A ghost in the machine. A single, flawed line of code. The 9 hours that followed were some of the most intense in AT&T's history. The company assembled its A-team, a tiger team of its best and brightest engineers, pulling them from their holiday. Their mission? Find the needle in a digital haystack. The initial theories were what you might expect. Was it a hardware failure? A malicious attack from a hacker? Sabotage? They explored every possibility. They physically inspected the switches, running diagnostics and searching for any sign of damage. But the hardware was fine. The machines were humming along, seemingly perfect. They were simply trapped in a loop, commanded by their own flawed software to continuously crash. The problem wasn't in the body, it was in the brain. The pressure was astronomical. Every passing minute meant millions of failed calls, millions in lost revenue, and a terrifying erosion of public trust. News outlets were beginning to pick up the story. This wasn't just a technical glitch anymore. It was a national crisis. The engineers worked feverishly, poring over mountains of data and diagnostic reports. They could see the pattern, the repeating cycle of resets, but they couldn't pinpoint the trigger. It was a maddening puzzle. They were fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The bug was so obscure that it only appeared under a very specific set of circumstances. A switch had to reset and send a message to another switch running the brand new updated software. It was a perfect storm of conditions. The breakthrough finally came after hours of painstaking analysis. The engineers managed to isolate the problematic message being sent between the switches. They traced it back to the recent software update. It was a gut-wrenching realization. The tiny, celebrated improvement they had just rolled out was the very thing destroying their network. They found the specific block of code, and within it, the single misplaced break statement. It was a human error, a typo on a colossal scale. One word, in the wrong place, had brought a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure to its knees. The solution, in theory, was simple. Roll back the software. Tell the switches to use the older, stable version. But doing that across a nationwide network of over 100 massive, complex machines, many of which were still rebooting, was a monumental task. The engineers devised a clever plan. They realized they could slow down the rate at which the switches were processing these messages. By throttling the network, they could break the chain reaction. It was like putting fire brakes in a forest fire. This would give them the window they needed to remotely access each switch and force it to reload the older, safer version of the software. One by one, switch by switch, they began to reclaim their network from the brink of collapse. As the old software took hold, the cascade of failures slowed and then stopped. The map in the control room began to turn from red back to green. 9 hours after the ordeal began, at around 11:30 p.m., the network was finally stable. The silence was broken. The dial tones returned. America could talk again. But the episode left a deep and lasting scar. It was a humbling lesson that in our increasingly complex and interconnected world, the difference between order and chaos can be as small as a single line of code.